Hello and welcome back to the Attacking 2 podcast. Today joined by Yannick on Chelsea. You know him already. We had our collaborations in January. He's back on the podcast. I'm very delighted to welcome him here. Links of him, of Jimmy, of myself, about Twitter handles, about anything else in the description below. We will be talking about today about the game against Fulham, which was a win, not a very convincing one, but nevertheless. And we will be talking about Sarri. How has he changed Chelsea around in the last week? We had a win against Tottenham, a win against Fulham. Things are going into the right direction. And I'll leave you with one question.
Are you listening? Damn. Yeah.
All right, folks. Let's start with the win against Fulham. Yannick, as you are our guest today, I leave you with the first answer to my question. How did you see that game, and what was your first kind of thoughts after the 2-1 win at Craven Cottage?
Okay, it's a nice broad question. Thanks for having me on, chaps. I'm pleased to take the lead on the first question here. Well, that game was a very, very interesting game for a multitude of reasons. Obviously, Kepa Gate being the first one, the man back in between the sticks, which feels the right decision. I don't think any of us want to overcook the narrative too much on this, but yeah, he paid his fine, he donated to charity, he apologised twice publicly, he was dropped and now he's back in, and he put in a great performance, bar a comical slip early doors. Yeah, the first 30 minutes of that game, superb. Even with the silly goal that we conceded, because I actually feel quite bad for Kepa there, because prior to conceding that goal, he pulled off what looked like a world-class save, which put it out for a corner, understandably, only to have a goal conceded from such an easy run on the far post, which was nothing to do with the goalkeeper, which is just defensive frailties. But yeah, opening goal from Higuain, class finish. Absolutely demonstrates his top centre forward ability. He nearly scored the identical goal later. I can completely forgive him for missing chances in that game, but because if he's going to bang one of those finishes each game, I'm completely pleased. And obviously the big talking point would be Jorginho scoring a 22-yarder top corner after having, in the last couple of games, an imperious defensive performance, which people were criticising him for, being a passer and not a defensive midfielder. And now, on top of all that, he's banged a world-class goal. So, opening 30 minutes, super, super interesting and exciting. And then, it's the majority, sort of the second half, or certainly the majority of the second half, was just terrifying. And that's my initial thoughts, Andy.
Yeah, very much a game of two halves. Against Fulham, and at the end of the day, we was lucky to not coming away with a draw there, as the goal in extra time was, of course, offside then. But Jimmy, when we talk about the first half, I guess you will be delighted about the second half, not so much. What changed in your mind that made the game kind of halfway slip away, but then not really?
I mean, the obvious answer to that would presumably be fatigue. I mean, they have been playing a lot recently. I mean, they played again in the Europa League, then they played against City, now they played against Tottenham, and that, then against Fulham. So it's been some very intense few weeks without real breather, and I guess that may have taken its toll in the second half. I mean, generally, I'd say there were also some concentration lapses which shouldn't have happened, even if you are tired. Hazard looked completely knackered, absolutely really knackered in that second half, and he was good that Sarri reacted. Maybe 5 minutes earlier would have been good, but generally, yeah, I you can't really fault the team for the performance, because they try to play the way Sarri wanted, as good as they did, as they could, and you saw that they were trying. So I'm not gonna say, they should have done better there, or this or that. I thought it was a good performance, decent, and goals were great. Higuain, his movement is just so good. The only snag to end on that note, the only snag is that goal at the end, even though it was offside, it shouldn't have happened. That was absolute lapse of concentration. The same with the first goal. The defensive errors, they continue, and that's the only thing that worries me for the end of the season.
And even though it was Fulham, we must honestly say that, I mean, Fulham hasn't played ever to their potential when you look at their squads. They should do so much better, but they don't have a defense. To only put 2 goals in, especially with the chances we've had in the first half, was a bit of a downside for me, even though the first half was better than the second one, of course. And then secondly, I have to say, with the change on the bench at Fulham, you could only expect them with 9 or before the game 10 games to go, and they have to more or less make 10 points up for, I think, the first spots they can stay in the league for. So they had to kind of battle it out, and they've done it. And you could hear it actually on television that Scott Parker told them times and times again, come on, put the ball into the box. Let's test the resistance, because they had Mitrovic up front and he's a decent player. And I was really happy with Christensen, seeing him there, that he actually, he had a tough time against Mitrovic. But of course, when you come away with a win, you've done something right. Kepa being man of the match, not a good sign if your goalkeeper's man of the match, though.
Man United effect.
Yeah. But yeah, I was really happy with Jorginho scoring. Not only that he scored a brilliant goal, but he actually won the ball for the kind of transition and then received it back on the edge of the box and put it, of course, in the top of the net, which was brilliant. Now, where do we go from here? I mean, we have won that game. It was a must-win game for us.
Sorry, Andy, can I just add some final context on that game before you move on? Like, Jimmy's right, you're right in terms of defensive frailties, but like just a little. I know this sounds a little bit excuses and defense sort of approach, but if you look at the kilometers our players had run in the previous 2 games against our biggest rival in Spurs in a cup final against the best team or one of in Europe, the amount of physical energy that would have drained and then mental energy that would have drained. So we were like running on one cylinder, and then versus Fulham, who are like granted, like you boys say, are very poor quality, but they were elated to have Scotty Parker there, and they were at home, and for the first time in a long time there was a feel good factor at the Cottage. I think I was there the last time there was a bit of an atmosphere against Brighton, and it's it is good once it gets going, that place. And if you look at their lineup, Fulham's issue is they spent loads of money really poorly, and not saying they got poor players. They got Schürrle, which is good on loan. Sarri's an excellent player, but they made their squad and their 11 dysfunctional. And that's what screwed up Jukanovic, which is a bit unfair in him in the end. But if you look at that team that did really good against us, that was very reminiscent of the Championship 11 that got promoted into the Premier League, and he went back to that. Sarri, Schürrle, these people weren't playing. It was a 4-2-3-1. Sessegnon was back in the team. It was Tom Cairney. It was McDonald, whatever his name is. And they should have, instead of spending 110 million on loads of players that made the squad dysfunctional, they should have spent 20 million on the centre back. That would have been better. Do you know what I mean?
That reminds me of QPR a few years back. 6 years back, they were buying like everyone, but it was not cohesive.
Yeah, so that's all I wanted to say, really. In terms of rounding up the context of that game, there was a feel-good factor there. We were fucked, and I think really that's actually quite a good win for us. It was wobbly, but we're stuck in a rock and a hard place. We either do super defensive, resilient Chelsea like we did against Spurs and Man City, or we go back to reverting to try and play Sarri ball like we did on the weekend, a couple of beautiful goals. But when you're that tired, Sarri ball is frail. So, I wouldn't worry too much. I know that's a difficult thing to say and worrisome times, but anyway, I just wanted to get that in.
Yeah, because you've said it, has Sarri changed enough because we want to talk about Sarri, and that actually made me question if he has changed enough in personnel for that game, that we looked so tired. I mean, our squad depth isn't the way we want it to be. But of course, if you play Jorginho again, Kante again, Rudiger again, Azpilicueta again, Hazard again, you will get found out in the second half. So do you think, Yannick first, was it enough of not only changing the way we play, but also changes in personnel?
Okay, well, it sounds like two questions. Like, is it enough? Do you mean just for that game in terms of
just for that game, but also as a whole?
Yeah.
I mean, does he change enough when we need him to?
Okay, well, for that game, I'd argue no, but we don't know the full context. You know, everyone was gagging for Ruben to start. Ruben came on. He seemed happy to come on. I imagine if Ruben fit in terms of fitness, it probably bar Callum Hudson-Odoi. Which, again, like, we as fans want to see him start every game that he's fit enough to or rested enough to. But Sarri might still really value him, want to circulate him in games. He probably, say we were winning that game 2-0, he probably brings him on anyway. I feel like he's probably doing the right thing. That's difficult to say. You know, although if Ruben Loftus-Cheek's completely fully fit and he doesn't start that game after, you know, other players playing, I think that would be my main critique. But I feel like he's changed enough in terms of formation, where we've shown that we can be more old school Chelsea and resilient and sit deep and not do a high press against the better sides and leave less space between the lines. But one thing I did see, and I discussed with you guys before we went on, is I was looking at the numbers of passes and completed passes in certain amounts of time, and there is a compromise in sort of slight formation and obviously tactical approach that we've all seen as football fans over the last few games from Sarri, not just being more sitting deep, but a lot more passes are going through Kante. Now, Kante's begun to shine more, and people aren't necessarily thinking that through passes. They're seeing him make interceptions more, they're seeing him, you know, interchange, but a lot more passes are going through him and a lot less are going through Jorginho. Now, that affords Jorginho to make these better defensive performances. I don't know if it was City or Spurs when he made most interceptions, most recoveries, and most tackles. You know, a very old school Kante style thing. And suddenly Kante's doing more interchanges up front, occupying space, yet more passes are going through Kante. So it's kind of this evolution of maybe Sarri ball, where the regista, you know, maybe by trade is still Jorginho, but a lot more passes are going through the right centre mid, which is interesting because that alleviates pressure on our lopsided left side attack. So maybe he's being a little bit more flexible with how he wants the metronome of Jorginho, or certainly all the passes to go through to the right. And that would be great. That would be great to hear, and that would be great to see, provided it's not, again, another overload of information for our players that's look frazzled at sometimes through information. But if it's literally like, okay, when we're in sector 2 or phase 2, instead of giving it to Jorginho, give it to Kante. Only don't give it to Kante. If you can't, then give it to Jorginho or something like that. But there does look like there's developments in his style, and that would be great. You know, we all know he is a good footballing mind. So provided that is coming to fruition and we've got options, then that could be, Kante could suddenly become just maybe the best midfielder in the world, all-round midfielder, you know? So, yeah.
Yeah. Question, however, is that a regular thing, or was that just a one-off because Hazard on the left wing was knackered and Willian was more or less playing his best game of the season and was picking up balls left, right, and centre, and that's the way Kante was playing more balls? I'm not quite sure, so I'm not convinced by one game. But if that happens another time, I'm happy to come back and say Yannick said it first. But
yeah. I think it is intentional. I genuinely think it is, and I'm sure you want to get Jimmy's thoughts on it as well. But another thing that we were discussing prior is I was talking about in terms of adaptability, how a really poignant and interesting point about Sarri is people say he's stubborn and he's like a strong idealist in his ways, which both may be true, but one thing is he did come across as that sort of softer talking therapist style coach in terms of wanting to nurture play in footballers. Right now, something I did say to you chaps is this is the biggest job Sarri will ever have. Our previous two successful managers in Conte and Jose had developed egos, knowing that they are very good title winning coaches, and Chelsea by no means is the biggest job they will ever have. You know, and it hasn't been, you know, Man United's a bigger job than Chelsea, and Jose got that. A lot of people would argue Juventus is a bigger job than Chelsea. So Sarri knows this is the biggest thing he'll ever get, and he hasn't got the ego to go with that. So I think he's open to talking and he's open to changing. He wants to make his football work, but he doesn't think he's golden. Doesn't think he's the golden boy. So I think that does bode well for us, and it probably bodes well for the players if they approach him and say, "Look, let's switch this up a bit." And if that comes with Jorginho, who's his surrogate son, if Jorginho's been chatting to like Louise, Willian, and his mates, and they're like, "Look, can we have a little chat with the gaffer here? You want to stay here, we want to stay here. Let's try and make this work." We'll have a sit down and make a slight alteration. I think that's a feasible, piece of narrative that could have happened.
So Sarri open to changes from players, getting told from players, and Sarri being a manager who changes enough in personnel. Your reactions to that, Jimmy?
I think I'm going to speak for everyone when I say I didn't really reckon he'd do it. I thought it would end that way, that they would part ways, so to speak, and that would be it, because he seemed very, very stubborn in that regard, and even explicitly said it on numerous occasions before tweaking things. I mean, I think that is something that one should keep in mind. He didn't change everything, he's still using the same players, basically. That talk of him now seeing Emerson as the main guy isn't the case, if you ask me, because he was using Alonso all the time, despite him needing a rest, so he could do the same with Emerson if he really was his top guy. And I think the points you two made with Kante is of course all true, but I think what also has helped is basically that we've got a striker. I'm sorry if you've already mentioned that, but I think Higuain finding into this team more and more is actually something that's integral. Because we have an outlet, someone who's doing that movement that is actually troubling defenders of opposition. And even though he didn't score many against Man City, but he was one of the few that tried. He's just that missing puzzle piece, even though I'm sure there are better strikers out there. Like there's rumours that Mauro Icardi may be available in the summer because of all the crap that's been going on. Sure, then you'd still get him. But for now, I think we could not have gotten a better striker that will also drive the team forward. There was always that example with Virgil van Dijk. There was a dysfunctional Liverpool team that was always bottling it. I mean, they are still bottling it, but you cannot deny that having Van Dijk in that team makes it 10 times better. It's so much poorer without Van Dijk. He showed that yesterday again in the Merseyside derby.
Yeah, he's a one-man team yesterday, wasn't
exactly. And the thing is, I even though Higuain hasn't had as big an impact as Van Dijk, I'd never presupposed that, but he has furthered this team in that he actually knows what he's doing and he is able to score. And if we play against the big boys, there are only 2 more games in that where Hazard plays in the middle. I've already explained on Twitter why I think that is actually a really good solution for the big games like Conte did last season. And Higuain doesn't score in those, but he scores against all the crappy teams where we had problems, like against West Ham, against Southampton, where we drew or lost. I can't remember. I think Palace as well. I'm not sure. So all those games, if he scores in them and we win, I'm fine with that. That's what he was essentially brought in for in January. So I think that was a great move by the board or by Sarri and his him saying that, and I think that shouldn't be overlooked.
No, that's a really good point Jimmy makes there. And more specifically, how Sarri's built this team to play a certain way. I know it sounds kind of simplistic, to play a certain way that's generally worked with a striker doing certain things. Even if you haven't made that direct correlation, or Sarri didn't think that correlation was mandatory, it's gonna help. You're right, Jimmy, in saying his movement, I'll say, it's almost unparalleled. I think him and Cavani have the best, but Cavani's more athletic than Higuain in terms of he'll do more like ballerina, like swoops, and he's got amazing movement. But Higuain knows where to go at the right time, and just that alone helps the team so much. And he doesn't go down. He just doesn't. He hasn't dived once, and even when he's fouled, he gets up. he doesn't complain. Even like Hazard complains when he's fouled on the floor. He literally just gets up, which says a lot about him as well. So yeah, I agree with Jimmy completely. I feel like that it does certainly, excuse me, improve the dynamic for the team as a whole, and it might actually be sort of discrete nuances rather than him making the direct run that occupy space. I think his presence and just small shuffles of when he sees Jorginho and the ball, of where he thinks that ball might eventually end up. So, do I go there or do I deliberately not go there? Little things like that.
Now that we have discussed that, and we have one game in spare against the other top 6 teams, and next one in line, of course, in the league after the Europa League game against Dynamo Kiev, is Wolverhampton Wanderers, sitting in 7th, so just one place behind us. Is that a make or break game for the rest of the season, Jimmy?
Well, it's tough. Let's say it like this. It's tough. We have 2 examples of whether it can work or it can't work. So I think it was 2 seasons ago, United won the Europa League, right? They put all their eggs in one basket and won it, and that's how they got in the Champions League, because they then surrendered, I think, to, what were they, 6th or something like that? That's where they ended.
Yeah. Yes.
And so they completely resigned in the Premier League, and they won it, and that's how they got in the Champions League. I'd be fine with that. I don't give a shit if we're 6th, but we get into the Champions League via the Europa League. We even win, European Cup. That would be grand. But then you have the example of Arsenal last year, where they also more or less put all their eggs in a basket, in the Europa League basket, and they bottled it. To be fair, Atletico Madrid is not a Europa League side, so we wouldn't be playing against that caliber in the Europa League. I think one has to, of course, have a look what kind of teams are still in it. There are some big ones like Napoli or Arsenal or I'm not too. They're in a bit of turmoil at the moment.
Oh, that's true, and they're not playing Icardi, are they? So.
No, they're not playing Icardi, and they're being dipped in form. That I'm sure that will change just before they play us. But generally, I'm not too worried about them. Napoli's a problem. Sevilla, I want to say. So Seville is a problem. They always are. And Arsenal. I think those 3 teams are. Napoli's. They are all beatable. Well, actually, Arsenal. I piss my pants before Arsenal games nowadays. We've had such a bad record in recent history. Since
Conte.
Since Conte, yeah, and even the win in September wasn't, or was it? No, it was August. Wasn't really very convincing, and then we got smacked. So, in that respect, I think it's still good. We have the squad depth to compete on 2 fronts. A few weeks back on the podcast, I said I'm not sure if we can do it on all 4. That's why going out of the FA Cup wouldn't be the worst thing in the world in this season. Of course, you want to win the League Cup final, but that's over now, done and dusted. But we only have those 2 competitions, and I think that's okay. Of course, the Thursday schedules fucks things up a bit. That is concerning. But if we've got Kiev, then if we draw like a mid-tier kind of team for the Europa League standards in the what is that then, the quarter final, then we're good. We can still play more of a second string team and still compete. We've only got 2 more big games in form of the top 6 opposition. And even though they're both away, I do think that we can get something from Anfield, not from Anfield, sorry, from Old Trafford, like a draw would be enough.
I guess Anfield is the easier way. I think in that kind of form at the moment.
You think
maybe?
So?
Yeah. Yeah. Didn't we win at Anfield in the cup?
We did.
We did, but they'll be playing for the title probably. I mean, that's
which bodes well for us.
It's the penultimate. Yeah, it is. We're Chelsea to the rescue again. But I just think United may be the more, not winnable, but at least to get a draw from that. But yeah, we'll just have to see. I think we've got good chances of proceeding to the next rounds in Europa League. I wouldn't substitute the one for the other at the moment.
No, yeah. I was going to say that, Jimmy, that we can't do what Jose did because we're in such a good opportunity with with the league as well in top four. I'm just looking at something that Infogol. Sorry, Andy, if you don't mind me just putting this in. Infogol, which is like a sort of a stat thing that I like. Well, something that I follow. They did this chart that they do a percentage thing about the top four, and the title race and stuff, and they use all sorts of different analytical sources and form and fixtures and probability. Basically, it's like a comprehensive system thing, right? So as it stands, Man City are going to win a sort of 66% chance of winning the league, and Liverpool have a 34% chance of winning the league on like form, fixtures, and loads of attributes. And then they do it at the top four. Now Tottenham have a 50% chance of coming third, and a 79% chance of staying in the top four. So they've got a 21% chance of dropping out the top four. Right now, the second best, highest odds of the top four is Chelsea. We have a 27% chance of coming third. So that's over a quarter odds, Okay, and then we've got a 32% chance of going fourth. All in, we've got a 59. Let's round up. Call it 60% chance of getting into the top four. Now, obviously, that works on sort of nuances. And then you look at the game at Old Trafford with United. That's the that flips everything on its head, because they're the second highest chance of getting the top four. Basically, Spurs are favourites. We're second favourites. And then it's Man United, and then it's Arsenal. Arsenal have a 28% chance of getting into the top four. So, but again, I must stress by these statistics. So it's really, really interesting. So if we, as far as I'm concerned, if we beat Man United at Old Trafford, bar like crisis and disaster, I think that should be us I think that should be us comfortable in top four. So we need to approach that game like we did the City game at Wembley or the Spurs game. That's when we need pragmatic Sarri. But in terms of the Europa League, it's an interesting one because it's still a bit of a slog, but it's also Dynamo Kiev, they're not going to be a walkover. They are Champions League team generally, and provided we get to do a lot at home, and these are the kind of games that we'd be calling out for Callum Hudson-Odoi. But now the pressure really is on. If we were sitting in second, but no, we can't win the league, and we'd like to have a crack in Europa, then we'd probably be more inclined to play Callum. But the fact how we're going, oh bloody hell, we might not get into the top four here. We need to go all in. So it's a difficult, stressful position for us. But as Jimmy said, I don't think we should throw one in for the other, because there's a very good chance of both, or a strong chance of both. But what do you reckon, Andy?
I guess looking at the league table, of course we have one game in hand, and if we win that, and that's a very winnable game against Brighton, we sit ahead of Manchester United and Arsenal, and of course, hypothetical, if we come away with a win at Old Trafford, that puts us 4 points ahead. And I'm not quite sure, apart from the Liverpool game, where we should lose 4 points against Manchester United, but you never know.
Yeah, they've got 3 games against the top 6, because they've got City, Arsenal, and us still.
So speaking about the Europa League, I was I wanted to respond straight away, but then you jumped in, Yannick, when Jimmy said, in the quarterfinals, a mid-tier team, we can't overlook Dynamo Kiev. And I did a bit of research on them, and they have that striker, Franz Sol.
You are such a party pooper.
Fuck you, Jimmy out.
They have the striker, Franz Sol, who is a Spanish striker, and he was a winter transfer for them. He came from Willem Tilburg, like that Willem II team, weird name in the Dutch Eredivisie. Yeah, and he scored for more or less a team that is playing in the bottom half of the league. He scored, I think, 15 goals in half a season. So he's quite a decent striker for them. And then they have, of course, international quality. They have Pivaric, who was in the Croatian national team, played quite a few games, and also the game against England in the semi-finals. We remember him. Yeah. And they have Vida. No, Vida actually went away, but they have good elite number of players.
But they've got pedigree as well, Kiev. So they won't want to get slapped about. And then us traveling over there, it's like a 3,000-mile trip or something. And then we've got to go away to Everton like 3 days later, which is just shit, man. And look what Everton just did to Liverpool. You'd argue maybe they'd come out a little bit more on the offensive against us, but then the Europa League, traveling to like Eastern Europe and everywhere, it's going to sting us in the league form as well. So
yeah, and it can be even at the end of March. It can be fucking cold over there. And it can be, they make it really tough for you. So you have to show everything. So we better come away with a win under the week. Because if you have to go there and get a result, it's going to be tough times for you.
Absolutely.
But anyhow, can we go to predictions about the next two games? So we have Dynamo Kiev first. So I come to you with the Dynamo game. Chips, what do we get from 90 minutes against the Ukrainian, I think the second team in the Ukrainian league?
What formation are they going to play, Jimmy?
How the hell do I know? The thing is, we played against Kiev a few years back, if I'm not mistaken. Wasn't that like in the group stage of the Champions League, right?
Probably, yeah.
It was
because I can remember we played against Alexander Dragovic.
It was the year. Yeah, I think it was the year where Mourinho went to the semi-finals with us.
Oh yeah. Wait, no. Wait a minute. Is that long ago? I can remember Dragovic. He played for Basel, then he played Kiev.
Then he played Kiev. Then he played Leverkusen. Then he went one season on loan to Leicester and back to Leverkusen.
All right, I'm hoping you've got Wikipedia open there, Andy.
Oh no.
Because that's too much information to know about that.
2013 to 15. That means it was in 2014. Because I can remember Dragovic scored against us, didn't he?
He did. Yeah. Header, I guess.
Yeah. So I mean, they weren't bad back then, but Ukrainian football has suffered a lot since then. Don't forget. I know they've got this one good striker you're talking about, but you can't forget that they're not. It's the same with Shakhtar. They're not the kind of team they used to be. And even though this one striker, the Spanish striker, or you were talking about, is doing well, that isn't the kind of caliber you would say, that he can hurt us. We should be able to still beat them comfortably. In theory, I don't want to get overconfident, I know. But, if you look at the squad, they have a few good attacking players, but otherwise, midfield, defense, and goal, there's not a lot of quality. They're only second in the league, in a very poor league, I must say. And as I said, Ukrainian football has suffered due to political reasons, which we don't need to go into detail about. But I think the only problem that we will have in that game is that we have to travel there. Which is pretty annoying. But I don't know. Are we away on Thursday?
No, we are at home. First game at home, second game away.
That means we play against who just before we go there?
Wolves. Isn't it back to back? So
wait, it's the following week, the second leg.
Yeah,
of course. It's the following week. You're right. That means it is Wolves. Wolves at home. Well,
and then Everton afterwards.
Yeah, I'd rather face Wolves at home than away, because at home they are beatable, while away it's really hard.
I'm assuming. Wait, did we lose to them away?
We did. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
So,
let's forget about that.
To be fair, we weren't actually the only ones.
No, they did a job against City.
Yeah, they got a draw. Anyway, so that is a bit of concern, but generally, I do think. I think we can all agree we should not cruise, but we should beat them, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we should.
No, I know we've been, a bit negative and all that, and it's been understandable. But if we're honest, that should be doable. And I think we should also address whether Callum Hudson-Odoi will play. I'm pretty sure he won't.
Yeah, to be honest.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, please, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I was sorry on that. I was going to say potentially because Wolves are the third most testing fixture left. I think we probably all agree. And
Way less playing, yeah.
Yeah, but still, I just really think the Wolves are a very, very good side, and they're so good against top tier
They are.
teams, and they're so good against top tier teams, and we are a top tier team, despite what anyone might tell you. So we need to be ready for that. We need David Luiz and Rudiger in super concentration mode. And have you seen the highlights of their goal the other day? It was like what Sarri ball's supposed to be. I think Liam Twomey tweeted it about. Sarri ball. Is that you?
Like 25 passes before.
Yeah, and it was vertical tiki taka. It was like Sarri ball. It was like up, down, left, right, diagonal, cut right bar in the back. If you back to this guy, you've spun the defender, walk in the net. It was beautiful. And Jimenez has been on form. He's looking really good again, and obviously they're just all on song. They've got real belief about themselves, and they've got absolutely nothing to lose. They're in like a Europa League spot, I think, seventh Europa League as well, isn't it? Isn't it, or is it a playoff? Fifth and sixth and seventh playoff, maybe. I don't know. Anyway, point being,
I think it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the seventh is only if the cup winner. I think it's either League Cup or FA Cup is already in the Europa League, or Champions League. Then the seventh spot gets
a playoff. Yeah. So they've got nothing to lose. And I feel like in that game, the industry of maybe the more senior wingers defensively might be better because they'll keep possession when they can, and they'll do devastating counter-attacks where I feel like we'll need a bit more savvy experience to defend. I'd much rather try and play Callum on different games, but this is one of the games where people complained, was it against Spurs or City? I can't remember which game when he didn't start, and they were talking about, well, look at what Pedro's doing. Or the Spurs game, Pedro obviously scored a sick goal, but that defensive tackle he made when he literally chopped it, scooped it, double tackled and dribbled it out of the defensive third. Obviously, Callum's not going to do that. Not because it's not in his ability, just because he's a kid and he won't, that's from being a 32-year-old experienced guy who's played for Barcelona and just knows, the game backwards. And that's no slight on Callum Hudson-Odoi, but, I just feel like because it's such a testing game left in the domestic calendar, that yes, I would want a senior winger playing on the right there, and I obviously value Callum Hudson-Odoi as an asset higher than Willian and Pedro, but in terms of immediate usage, I'd have to actually think like a pragmatic Chelsea manager and be like, yes, please, actually, can we not play Callum for this game and have one of these guys there?
That would, however, mean that he can play under the week, which might be the case, might not be the case. But
it's at home, so yeah.
Yeah, but looking at the winger situation, Eden Hazard was obviously knackered, and I guess he will be saved for Wolves on the weekend.
Yep.
Then William played 90 minutes against Fulham, so the likelihood that Callum Hudson-Odoi actually gets a start in the Europa League is given, I guess. And I would actually like to think that he even plays on the left wing, which I think is his preferred position.
Not on the right.
Yeah, because Pedro on the right would mean Pedro can't really play on the left, can he? So he will play on the right. Callum Hudson-Odoi on the left would actually excite me. So I think as a prediction for these two games, I'm going for a quite convincing win against Dynamo Kiev, 2-0 or 3-0. And I'm going for a tight win against Wolves, which will be a 2-1. Jimmy.
I'd like to think we will beat them, but I kind of see a draw coming. But I know. I'm sorry. Don't want to be moaning Maureen, but no, I don't know. It depends. Let's say we win against Kiev on Thursday. Let's say we win against wait a minute.
Dynamo Kiev.
Kiev, yeah, and let's say we win against Wolves on it was Wolves on Sunday. Then that could give us real momentum. But I just have the feeling that we'll draw because all the amount of games we played. I don't think there will be that much rotation on Thursday. I really would love to see Callum Hudson-Odoi, but I can't imagine he will. I can't.
No, I'm with you on that. I don't think he would on Wolves. I think he will.
A shame, but can't be helped.
Well, do you want my prediction? Because I'm about to nail my colours to the mast here.
No, I'm good, thank you.
Right, so my prediction is we are gonna beat Dynamo Kiev convincingly at home in our stadium, 3 or 4-0. We are going to be Wolves at home because, again, it's back at the Bridge and we've been better at the Bridge. It's only away that we've had terrible form. Certain players will come back into the first team, will be buoyed by Kepagate, return to form, the cup final. The embarrassments are gone. That will be a lesson fermented in the team's mind. And we are going to beat Wolves 3-1, but the final Chelsea goal will come very late. So it'll be like a 2-1. Oh, God, who's going to score next? Is it going to be a draw like Jimmy says, or is it going to be a 3-1 like Yannick says? It's going to be like Yannick says. And we're also going to win away in Kiev. Just to get my thoughts on that, it will be both teams to score, but we'll win convincingly going through to the quarterfinals. So there you have it. Get your bets on.
Well,
you're welcome.
That's a lot of positivity. I'm not sure if I can take that. But however, let's end this episode with Jimmy telling you what you should do regarding following, subscribing, and whatever.
Yes, sir. So please do follow us as always on Twitter, with our Twitter handle being @attacking2pod. Do give us a good rating on iTunes. 5 stars would be very much appreciated. We won't be uploading to YouTube this week as we've only done the audio, but nevertheless, do subscribe. We'd be very grateful for that as well. Of course, do follow Jan on Twitter if you must. No, please do, and also check out his latest featuring for BBC Radio 5. It was, wasn't it?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, 5 Live. Yeah, it's on my
5
Twitter.
Live. Yeah, it was a very good listen, and he represented us Chelsea fans absolutely fantastically.
Thank you very much.
Make sure to check that out. Of course, Twitter handle being, if I'm not mistaken, @Chelsea Yannick, right?
Correct, @Chelsea Yannick.
Perfect. Yep, that. Andy, over to you.
Yeah, that concludes it for today. Thanks for listening and keep the blue flag flying high.